Chapter 1. The spark ignites. The hum of the Lysander's engines thrummed deep within the metal hull. The sound a constant reminder that they were hurtling through the void at faster-than-light speeds. Evan Cross leaned against the observation window, his fingers lightly tracing the cold glass. The stars outside seemed to stretch and blur into an endless ribbon of light, distant beacons swallowed by the vastness of space. It was beautiful, in a way that was almost too much to take in. Behind him, the crew moved with purposeful strides, their boots clicking on the polished floors of the bridge. The crew was a mosaic of alien species, tall, lithe aeroliths with their translucent, iridescent skin that shimmered in the light, the stoic, dark-eyed Shar with their angular features and unwavering gazes, and of course the humans, whose presence in deep space was still something of an anomaly. He could feel it, the tension, not just in the air, but in the way the crew interacted. Humans were stubborn. They always had been, and it showed. They didn't just survive in space. They thrived. And that, more than anything, had earned them the respect of their alien counterparts. But it was also what made them dangerous. The crew knew that, just as they knew the mission they were about to embark on was no ordinary job. Evan's gaze flicked over to the tactical display, the alien language of his navigator, Aerolin, the Shar diplomat, flashing in swirling patterns on the screen. She stood at the helm, her tall form graceful, with the familiar coldness that came with her species' emotional reserve. Unlike the humans, the Shar were masters of control, their emotions locked away in a place that Evan knew, no matter how much he wanted to reach it, he would never fully understand. "All systems are stable," Aerolin said, her voice a smooth contrast to the harsh mechanical hum surrounding them. "We'll be in range of the signal within the hour." Evan didn't move, his eyes still focused on the stars, but his mind was elsewhere. The signal, a mystery that had drawn him from the safety of Earth's orbit and into the unknown fringes of the galaxy. There were whispers in the Federation about what they might find, a long-lost alien race, a weapon or worse. His stomach twisted at the thought. No one ever truly knew what lay in the unexplored reaches of space. "You're thinking too much." Aerolin's voice cut through the silence again, this time with an edge of something that could almost be described as amusement. He turned to look at her, eyes narrowing. "And you're not thinking enough." The aerolith navigator, J-Tar, shot them both a quick glance from his station, his long silver hair glistening like liquid mercury under the artificial lighting. He was too quiet these days, his mind clearly elsewhere, and Evan couldn't blame him. The Lysandra was too close to the dark fringes of space for comfort. "Still not talking to me, Jay," Evan said, trying to break the tension. But it didn't land the way he'd hoped. J-Tar's black eyes flickered up for just a moment, but the look was enough to silence any further attempts. Aerolin's lip twitched, her brow furrowing slightly in what might have been the smallest show of emotion. "He's focused. He's not like you, Cross. You'll need to learn how to focus when you get to the signal." Evan bit back a retort. He wasn't some green recruit to be lectured, but there was truth in her words. The mission ahead would demand more than his usual recklessness. A flash of light on the tactical display caught his attention. The signal was coming through clearer now. He stepped forward, ignoring the subtle, challenging look Aerolin shot him, and watched as the alien symbols shifted across the screen. Something about them felt wrong, like a puzzle half-formed. His heart quickened. This wasn't just a distress call. "This is it," Evan said softly. We're getting closer. Erilyn joined him at the console, her fingers light on the controls, translating the symbols with an elegance that only someone raised to understand Shar technology could possess. Evan's breath caught in his throat. He realized with a cold, creeping certainty that they were about to discover something that could change everything. The dark stretch of space around them seemed to pulse with possibility, each star now holding the weight of the unknown. You ready for this? Erilyn's question was soft, almost teasing. Evan's jaw tightened. I've been ready my whole life. Outside the observation window, the stars blinked and twinkled, a million whispers from the universe. And in the silence that followed, something, almost imperceptible, shifted. The air hummed louder. The mission had begun. Chapter 2. Whispers in the void. The Lysander drifted through the void, the engine hum settling into an almost meditative pulse as the crew continued their slow approach to the derelict station. The distance between them and their destination, once vast, was now measured in moments rather than miles. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, pinpricks of light that filled the endless black. But the further they ventured, the heavier the atmosphere became, laden with an oppressive, silent weight. Even the stars seemed to shudder in their distant orbits. Evan leaned against the console, eyes scanning the readouts as they grew closer to the mysterious space station. He had always imagined space as vast, empty, but this was different. It felt wrong, like they were intruding upon something that shouldn't be disturbed. His fingers drummed lightly on the metal, a nervous tick that he couldn't shake. Approaching station's gravity well, Jaytar's voice broke through the tension, as calm and cold as ever. His hands danced over the controls, manipulating the complex alien instruments with ease. The aerolith was the best pilot Evan had ever worked with, silent, precise, and unervingly effective. But even Jaytar's silence couldn't mask a growing sense of unease that seemed to hang around the crew like a thick fog. Erilyn stood nearby, her gaze fixed on the tactical display, her usually composed face now shadowed with something more. Maybe it was worry, or perhaps something deeper. Evan couldn't quite tell, but it gnawed at him. She was never this still, this quiet. Signal source seems to be emanating from within the station itself, Erilyn murmured, her voice soft, laced with an unfamiliar tension. It's not just an abandoned relic. This place is alive in a way that doesn't make sense. Its architecture, it's impossible. Evan turned to face her. Her hands rested lightly on the console, fingers just shy of the alien glyphs that were still flickering intermittently across the display. She looked more like a foreigner here than ever before. Even though it was her species that had crafted much of the technology they were surrounded by, the Shar had an intricate understanding of energy fields, of ancient machinery. But even she seemed troubled by the energy signatures pulsing from the station. You're telling me this place is a weapon? Evan's voice was sharper than he intended, a mix of disbelief and something close to fear. No, Erilyn replied quickly, her eyes narrowing as she processed the data. Not exactly, but it's something more. It's almost like the station itself is aware of us. Jaytar's dark eyes flicked too. Erilyn hesitated before responding, her brow furrowing. Not a machine. Something older. Much older. The Lysandra drew closer to the station, its broken, skeletal frame emerging from the darkness, towering above them like the remains of some forgotten god. The station's shape was asymmetrical, Shards of metal twisting in strange, unnatural angles, organic curves meshing with jagged spikes. It had once been a hub for interstellar travel, a nexus of cultures, trade, and diplomacy. Now it was a ruin, eerily silent, its atmosphere as sterile as the vacuum around it. The faint hum of power still lingered, but there was no sign of life. As they docked, Evan felt a shiver crawl up his spine. It wasn't the coldness of space that unsettled him. It was the way the station seemed to watch them, the way it seemed to know they were here, waiting for them, anticipating their every move. The airlock hissed open, and the metallic scent of old, recycled oxygen filled the chamber. Erilyn was the first to step out, her boots echoing against the empty floor. She moved with purpose, though there was a stiffness to her stride, as though she were walking through a fog of memories that weren't her own. "Stay alert," Evan said, his voice low. His hand instinctively reached for the sidearm at his waist, though he wasn't sure what they might face. Whatever had happened here wasn't just an abandoned station. It was something more, a ghost of another time, a place that should have been left untouched. They moved down the narrow corridors, the walls lined with old, half-broken consoles and lights that flickered erratically. The distant sound of the Lysander's engines hummed in the background, as if the ship was their only tether to the outside world. The silence on the station was oppressive. Even the alien tech that powered it felt wrong, like the whispers of something forgotten, urging them to turn back. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. The once glowing murals along the walls, images of alien species, some peaceful, others warlike, now seemed to stretch, warped by the station's age, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Erilyn halted in front of a large, circular chamber, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Evan moved up beside her, his hand tightening around the grip of his weapon. The doors ahead were sealed, but there was no mistaking the faint, erratic pulse coming from beyond. It was a signal. "This is where it's coming from," Erilyn said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze was fixed on the doors, and though she remained as stoic as ever, there was a flicker of hesitation in her posture. The air in the chamber seemed to ripple, thick with energy. The temperature dropped suddenly, and Evan shivered. Something was here, something they had no words for, no understanding of. He could feel it in his bones, deep in his gut, the sense that they were not alone. Without warning, a low, vibrating hum filled the room, followed by a series of distorted voices. Alien, yet familiar. Echoes of an ancient language, reverberating against the walls. Evan's heart raced. This was no ordinary signal. This was something alive. Erilyn stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "We've been invited," she said softly, her voice tense. "Whatever this place is, it wants us here." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Evan glanced at his crew, his pulse hammering in his chest. One way or another, they were about to learn the truth about what lay hidden in the void. Chapter 3. Fighting Shadows. The station's dark corridors stretched on before them, a labyrinth of metal and shadow, each corner more oppressive than the last. Evan's breath came a little faster than usual as he led the crew through the cold silence. The hum of the Lysander was long gone, replaced by the eerie resonance of the station itself, like the low thrum of some forgotten beast waiting. The deeper they ventured, the more the temperature dropped. His breath hung in the air, visible in the flickering light. The metallic smell of the station was sharp, mixed with a faint scent of something something old, rotting, like a room left locked for centuries. The very walls seemed to exhale a damp, dismal chill that settled on his skin like a weight. Erilyn led the way, her lithe form a shadow among shadows, her alien eyes adjusting to the dark as if it were nothing more than the midday sun on Shar. Jatar followed closely behind, his long silver hair barely brushing his shoulders, his face unreadable as always. Evan kept a hand near his sidearm, a nervous tick more than a necessity, though a growing tension prickled at the back of his neck. Something was wrong. "There's something in the air," Erilyn muttered, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her usual calm demeanor had shifted, a crack in her perfect composure. "I can feel it, like something is watching us." Evan's pulse quickened. The alien diplomat was rarely shaken, but something had unsettled her. "Watch your step," he said, his voice low. "We don't know what's here yet." The corridor ahead split into two, and Jatar raised a hand, signaling to stop. He crouched down, touching the ground with one clawed hand. "This isn't just a station," he said softly, his voice like wind through dead leaves. "It's a temple." Evan blinked, not fully understanding. "A temple?" Jatar nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the shifting shadows. This structure was built to worship something, an entity or force that the builders feared. His voice dropped lower. "And now, that fear seems to be alive." The hairs on the back of Evan's neck prickled. He glanced at Erilyn, who seemed lost in thought, her gaze unfocused as she processed Jatar's words. The Shar were pragmatic, highly logical. For her to be uncertain about something as basic as a structure's purpose was unsettling. "We need to keep moving," Evan said, his voice snapping like a whip. The tension in his chest was unbearable, the feeling of something ancient and malevolent stirring in the dark. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. They continued forward, their footsteps now muffled by the soft, spongy texture of the floor, an oddity in a place of this design. The walls seemed closing on them, the angles too sharp, too unnatural. At times, Evan felt like the station was contracting around them, as though it were alive and angry at their intrusion. Suddenly, the station groaned, an overwhelming deep sound, as if the very bones of the structure were protesting their presence. Evan's heart raced. A shudder ran through his body, and he heard something that made his blood run cold. A whisper. At first, it was faint, barely audible over the sound of their boots. Then it grew louder, hissing incoherent words, as though they were being spoken from the very walls themselves. A language no human had ever heard. The whisper swirled around them, soft and chilling, like a dozen voices speaking at once, filling the air with a sense of impending doom. Evan spun around, his weapon already drawn. Did anyone else hear that? Erilyn's eyes were wide now, her skin paling as the whispers filled her ears. It's in my head. I can hear it in my thoughts." But as they moved, the darkness closed in around them. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, swirling in their minds, feeding off their fear. Evan could feel it, the way it tugged at his emotions, trying to break his will. His pulse quickened, his vision blurred, but he pushed forward. They had to get out of here. The creature followed them, its shadow stretching across the walls like ink spilling from a broken bottle. But then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the darkness pulled back, retreating into the walls as if it were nothing more than a bad dream. The whispers stopped. The air returned to its frozen stillness. Evan breathed heavily, his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced at Erilyn and Jaytar, both of them equally shaken, their faces pale. "It's testing us," Erilyn whispered, her voice trembling with the fear she had so carefully hidden. "It's feeding on our weakness." Evan didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the darkened hallway ahead. The creature had retreated, for now, but he knew it wouldn't be the last time they encountered it. The station was alive, and whatever lived here didn't want them to leave. "We need to finish this," Evan said, his voice cold, hard. "No more running." But as they moved forward, deeper into the heart of the station, the shadows followed, always just behind, waiting for the right moment to strike. Chapter 4. The Heart of the Darkness. The deeper they ventured into the heart of the station, the more the air seemed to thicken. The walls curved inward, the hallways narrowing, as though the station itself were constricting around them. The once gleaming metal now looked corroded, covered in a sickly greenish-black residue that seemed to pulse faintly with an unsettling rhythm. Even the soft hum of the station's power seemed distorted, like it was breathing, labored and unnatural. The crew moved forward, weapons drawn, their footsteps muffled against the strange, spongy surface beneath them. Evan could feel it, like a slow pressure building in his chest. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. Every footstep, every turn they made, felt like an intrusion. They were trespassers here in this ancient, forgotten place. And whatever dark force had inhabited, it was aware of their presence. "There's something off about this place," Jaytar muttered, his voice unusually strained. His silver hair shimmered in the dim light, his eyes scanning the walls as though the shadows might spring to life at any moment. "The station's architecture, it's not just alien, it's wrong." Evan nodded but didn't respond. He could feel it too, the strange, nauseating sensation that seemed to cling to the walls. His skin prickled, goosebumps rising as if the very station was trying to whisper to him, to pull him into its depths. The whispers hadn't stopped since they first encountered the shadow, though now they were quieter, softer, like a low hum beneath their thoughts. The corridor opened up into a vast chamber, much larger than anything they'd seen so far. The walls were smooth and rounded, as though carved from the living rock of an ancient world. At the center of the room was a massive, circular pool of dark liquid, glowing faintly with an eerie green light. The liquid shimmered with unnatural iridescence, swirling as if it had a life of its own. Erilyn stepped forward, her eyes narrowed, taking in the strange, haunting beauty of the scene. "This is no ordinary station," she said, her voice almost reverent. "This place. It's a temple, as Jaytar suggested, but not in the way we think. It's a place of worship, yes, but not a god you'd recognize." Evan walked closer to the pool, his boots tapping softly against the metallic floor. His reflection shimmered on the surface of the liquid, distorted by the ripples that seemed to move of their own accord. It wasn't water. It was something else, something more organic. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath, unable to take his eyes off it. "It's a vessel," Jaytar said, his voice heavy with something between awe and fear. "A conduit for something ancient. The energy here, it's alive. It's feeding off the station, off us." Evan's mind raced, a cold dread seeping into his bones. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Feeding off us?" He could barely grasp what Jaytar was implying. Erilyn, seemingly unable to keep her composure any longer, stepped closer to the pool. It's feeding on emotions, Evan. Fear, sorrow, regret. She shook her head, taking a step back as if the very thought unsettled her. We are its sustenance. The hum in the room grew louder, more insistent, vibrating in their bones. It was as though the station had awakened, its ancient purpose rippling out into the present. The whispers returned, louder now, pressing against their minds. They spoke of forgotten worlds, of an eternal hunger that had devoured civilizations, of a darkness that had been bound here for millennia, until now. Suddenly, the floor beneath them groaned, and the air turned thick with a presence, an unnatural weight that pressed down on them, suffocating them. Evan staggered, his vision momentarily blurring. His mind was assaulted with images, horrible, fragmented visions of destruction, of ships torn apart, of worlds burning, of entire species wiped from existence by a force they had never understood. A sharp pain pierced his temple. He gasped, clutching his head as the images flared bright, overwhelming his senses. It was like a tidal wave of emotion, grief, loss, rage, all crashing over him in a single, mind-numbing instant. Evan! Erilyn's voice cut through the chaos, but it sounded distant, like she was trapped in the same nightmare. Fight it. You have to fight it. He snapped his eyes open, heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't alone. The creature, the darkness that had been following them, was here. It had manifested in the chamber, a swirling mass of shadow and despair. It rose from the pool like smoke from an old fire, its form twisting and churning with dark energy. But this time, it wasn't just an entity. It was a presence, alive with the collective pain of ages, a mind that pulsed with an ancient hunger. And it was staring right at him. It is the station, Jatar said, his voice laced with fear. It's not a machine. It's an entity. The figure reached out, tendrils of darkness snaking toward them, warping the very air as they reached for their minds. It was a being of pure despair, an ancient power trapped here, feeding on the echoes of lost civilizations. It had waited for them, for the crew to unlock its prison. Evan stumbled backward, his legs shaking. He had no words, no plans. The only thing he knew was that they were outmatched. The creature was beyond their understanding. And yet, he couldn't let it win. He couldn't allow humanity to be swallowed by this thing, to fall into the same pit of despair that had claimed so many others before them. A thought sparked in his mind, a fleeting moment of clarity. "We fight together," he said, his voice rough but resolute. "Humanity doesn't fall. Not today." Erilyn stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. Though the fear still lingered in her expression, she knew what this creature could do, and yet she was ready to face it. They all were. The creature writhed, sensing their defiance, but it could not understand their resolve. "Not yet. We are not your food," Evan said more firmly now. "We are the spark you cannot extinguish." The creature recoiled, as if the very concept of hope, of resistance, was alien to it. The shadows quivered, the whispers faltering as the crew gathered, united, a small, fragile beacon against an ancient, all-consuming darkness. The real battle had only just begun. Chapter 5. A Spark of Light. The station trembled, groaning like an ancient beast coming to life. The air was thick, heavy with an energy so oppressive it felt as though the very fabric of space had been twisted. The creature, the darkness, hovered before them, its tendrils writhing, expanding like liquid smoke, enveloping the chamber. Evan stood at the center, his heart pounding in his chest, every nerve screaming at him to run, but his feet were rooted to the ground. This was it, the final confrontation. He knew with a cold certainty that they couldn't afford to fail. The whispers, the maddening voices, filled his mind again. They pressed against him, clawing their way into his thoughts, dredging up his deepest regrets, his darkest memories. He could hear his old crew's voices, those he had lost in past battles. He could see their faces, hear their screams as the darkness had torn them apart. Evan clenched his fists. His jaw tightened. He had failed them once. He wasn't about to make the same mistake again. Focus! Erilyn's voice cut through the chaos, calm but filled with urgency. She was beside him, her alien features tight with concentration, her hands glowing faintly as she channeled energy from the station's strange technology. This creature, this thing feeds on our despair. You have to let go of it, or we'll all be consumed. Evan didn't respond. His gaze locked on the shadow that loomed before him, the living darkness that hung in the air like a storm ready to break. The creature was everywhere now, its influence stretching across the room, filling every corner, every crevice, every inch of the station with its consuming presence. But Evan had no intention of letting it win. Not again. Erilyn's words echoed in his mind. Let go. He had spent so long running from his past, burying the mistakes, hiding from the faces of those he had failed. But now he realized that wasn't the answer. The darkness fed on his regret, on his guilt, because he refused to face it. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, then pushed everything to the surface. The grief, the loss, the weight of the lives lost under his command. His friend, Ash, whose name he could still hear echoing in his mind. The faces of those he couldn't save. His own weakness. The creature recoiled slightly, sensing his surrender, its mass shifting as it tried to feed on his pain. But Evan held his ground, his eyes burning with something deeper than regret. He wasn't just a man full of failure. He was a survivor. He had lived, and he had learned. The pain was a part of him, yes, but it wasn't everything he was. It wasn't the whole of his story. Enough! He shouted, his voice breaking through the psychic pressure that had been pressing on them. His voice didn't waver. It cut through the air like a blade. You don't own me. The shadows paused, flickering as if confused. There was no response, only the deep, empty echo of space outside the station. Evan could feel the pressure building, a storm about to break. But he was ready. This wasn't just about him. He wasn't alone. We are not alone, Erilyn said, her voice firm, and Evan could hear the conviction behind it. Her energy flowed in a steady pulse, resonating with the strange technology of the station. The others, the crew, they are with you. At her words, the other stepped forward, Jaytar, his dark eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. The rest of the crew, human and alien alike, united in the face of the overwhelming darkness. They each held their ground, their resolve solidifying as one. They were more than just a crew. They were a family. The creature snarled, its form twisting as it recoiled from the growing light within the room. It sensed them. It could feel their unity, their strength. It had fed on the isolation and despair of civilizations for millennia. But this was different. These humans, these aliens, had something the darkness could never comprehend. The power of connection, of fighting together, of rising after defeat. Evan took a step forward, his heart beating in time with the pulse of the energy around them. He held out his hand, palm open, feeling the connection to the others, to the station, to the unknown force that powered it all. He wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was fighting for the survival of everyone who came before him, for every life lost in the name of progress, and for every soul who had given their heart to this war. In that moment, he understood something. He wasn't the savior. The spark of light wasn't within him alone. It was within all of them. The crew, the alliance of species. The united would have pushed back against the darkness that had never truly understood what was up against. "We are not your prey," Evan whispered, more to himself than to the creature. "We are the ones who fight back." The energy in the room surged, the pulse of light growing stronger, brighter. It wasn't just from the station, but from the crew, from Evan's heart, from the collective will of all who had come together. The darkness shrieked, its form splintering, crumbling under the weight of their defiance. Evan took another step forward, his voice steady. "You cannot win. You never could." With a final, deafening howl, the creature's form shattered. The shadows dissipated, and the whispers that had filled their minds for so long ceased. The room, once filled with the oppressive weight of despair, was now bathed in an eerie golden light. For the first time since they entered the station, the air seemed to clear, the oppressive tension lifting. The hum of the station's power began to steady, the erratic pulse replaced with a harmonious resonance. The dark liquid in the pool shimmered one last time, then began to settle, its glow fading into nothing. Evan stood at the center of the room, his body trembling from the exertion, but his mind clear for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The darkness had been banished, not through force, not through weaponry, but through the one thing the creature could never understand. The light that came from the hearts of those who refused to bow to despair. "We did it," Erilyn said softly, her voice filled with quiet awe. Evan didn't answer. He was looking out at the now-still pool, his mind finally quiet, free from the weight of the past. He had faced the darkness. And in the end, it was not just humanity that had triumphed, but the strength of unity, of hope. As the crew gathered around him, there was no need for words. They all understood. They had fought the darkness and returned with the spark of light, together, and that was all they needed to know. Chapter 6. The Light Beyond. The station, once a twisted monument to forgotten fear, now felt like a quiet echo of what it had been. The lights flickered overhead, but they were no longer erratic, no longer pulsing with the same malevolent energy that had surrounded them since their arrival. The air was cleaner now, free from the weight of the darkness that had pressed against their minds. It was still cold, too cold for comfort, but Evan could feel the difference. The temperature, the atmosphere. It was as if the station had exhaled after holding its breath for centuries. Evan stood by the edge of the now-still pool, his eyes scanning the dim glow of the chamber. The echoes of the creature's presence still lingered in the back of his mind, a faint reminder how close they had come to falling into the abyss. But that was all it was now, a memory, fading as quickly as the last remnants of the darkness dissolved into nothing. Erilyn approached him quietly, her movements graceful despite the lingering tension in her posture. She didn't speak at first, simply watching with those alien eyes, dark, unreadable, yet somehow filled with something Evan had come to understand. A quiet respect, perhaps, or something more. "We did it," she said softly, as if testing the words, letting them settle between them. Evan nodded, his expression unreadable. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The darkness was gone, but it had left its mark on them, on the station. There were still questions, still mysteries to be unraveled, and the galaxy beyond this forsaken place had no idea what had just occurred in this ancient, forgotten corner of space. "What happens now?" Evan asked, his voice low. It wasn't just the station he was referring to. It was them, the crew, the universe. Erilyn studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. "That's the question, isn't it?" Her voice was softer now, as if the tension of the moment was starting to lift. "There's still so much we don't know about what happened here, about the creature, the station. But we can't stay here forever. This place is a tomb." Evan felt a ripple of unease. They'd purged the darkness from the station, but the silence it left in its wake was almost worse than the whispers had been. The weight of centuries of isolation pressed down on the station's walls. Each broken piece of technology, each shadowed corner a reminder of how long the darkness had reigned. "We can't let it go unnoticed." Jaytar's voice cutting from behind, his tone solemn. "What happened here? The power of that entity. It could be more widespread than we realize. We don't know if this was an isolated incident or if there are others like it, hidden away in the deepest parts of the galaxy." Evan turned to face him, meeting his gaze. The aerolith was standing tall, his expression hard but thoughtful. Despite his usual stoicism, there was something in his eyes that told Evan he understood the weight of what they had just experienced. "I agree," Evan said, his voice steady. "But first, we need to get out of here. We've done what we came to do, and this place is no longer safe." Erilyn nodded, glancing around the chamber. The faintest flicker of something, maybe uncertainty, flashing her eyes. "We have to report what happened. The Federation needs to know. This station, this entity, it's something they need to prepare for. There's no telling how many others are out there, waiting. And how do we even begin to explain this?" Jaytar asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "How do we tell them about a sentient shadow that devours civilizations?" "We don't need to explain it all at once," Evan said, turning toward the exit. "We give them the facts, the data we've collected. They'll understand. Or they'll have to." The crew moved with purpose, their steps measured as they made their way back toward the docking bay. The once ominous corridors felt emptier now, the shadows no longer alive with the same malevolent presence. The Lysander was waiting for them at the docking bay, its sleek form gleaming in the dim light of the station's fading power. As they reached the ship, Evan stopped for a moment, glancing over his shoulder at the station. It loomed behind him, silent, its dark history now part of his own. He would never forget what had happened here, the way the darkness had tried to consume them, the way they had fought back. They hadn't just defeated an entity. They had proved something to the galaxy. They weren't just survivors. They were the ones who fought for the light when all seemed lost. "We leave this place behind," Evan said, turning back to the crew. "But we carry what we've learned with us, and we'll face whatever comes next together." Erilyn, Jaytar, and the rest of the crew nodded in silent agreement. They had crossed into the unknown and emerged victorious, stronger than they had ever been before. The darkness had been their enemy, but in the end, it was their unity, their resilience, that had overcome it. The Lysander's engines roared to life, the hum vibrating beneath their feet as the ship detached from the station. As they ascended into the cold expanse of space, the station grew smaller in the viewports, its once intimidating form now just another speck in the vastness of the galaxy. The stars outside seemed to shine brighter than before, as if the universe itself had shifted. The darkness had tried to swallow them, but it had failed. The light within them had won. As the Lysander glided away from a forsaken station, Evan couldn't help but glance at the stars outside the viewport. They were no longer distant, cold pinpricks in the vast expanse of space. They were possibilities. They were the future. And for the first time in a long time, Evan Cross felt hope burn brightly in his chest. There was still so much to do, so much they didn't understand. But he knew one thing for sure. The light, the spark they had kindled, was not going out. Not now. Not ever. The Lysander glided to the starry expanse, its engines humming softly beneath the silence of the void. Beyond the viewport, alien constellations stretched in every direction, their vibrant hues painting the canvas of space like an artist's final stroke. The cold, sharp beauty of the cosmos was both awe-inspiring and humbling, but tonight there was warmth in the air. Evan stood at the observation deck, his hands clasped behind him. The battle was over. The darkness that had haunted them, the shadow that fed on fear and despair, was nothing more than a fading memory now. The creature was gone. The station was left behind, and the galaxy, vast and unknowable, had opened up before them. Erilyn approached silently, her presence like a calm breeze. She stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the shimmering lights of distant cities, on alien worlds. They had both been changed by what they had faced, the horrors they had survived, and the sacrifices they had made. "I thought we were just survivors," Evan said, his voice rough but steady. "But we're more than that, aren't we?" Erilyn met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the stars. "Yes," she whispered. "We're the ones who fight for the light, even when it seems lost." He turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Then let's keep fighting together." For a moment, neither spoke, but in the quiet of the observation room, there was a shared understanding. They had found something in the darkness, not just a way to survive, but a reason to hope. And in that fleeting moment, under the endless sky, Evan took her hand. The stars outside burned brighter than ever before, not just as distant points of light, but as beacons guiding them home. "Together," Erilyn said softly, and for the first time, it felt like the future was within reach.